Born and raised on a council estate in northern England, an ad in a local paper, followed by university as a mature-age student, set Paul Queeney on a path far from home. His adventurous career has taken him to Moscow, Prague, Hong Kong and Jamaica. But he's come to call Australia and IT home. First with some big retail corporates, and now with kids bringing tech solutions to education. So is he a game changer? Let's find out. I'm Gemma Acton. Welcome to Game Changers in partnership with Logicalis. Paul, you've seen so much of the world, and technology and your job have really been your ticket to get there. How many countries have you worked in at this point?
Oh my goodness, a lot. Probably,
double digits?
Yes, yeah. Probably the main one's probably Ireland. I lived in Ireland for a good number of years, 7 years. I've worked in Hong Kong for a stint. I was in Moscow for a while. Worked in most Western European countries, Czech Republic for a while, and then obviously ended up in Australia at a point in that particular journey. And
technology has been the common link that's threaded it all together.
Absolutely. Couldn't have done it without that particular thread in my life. Yeah.
What sparked your initial interest?
Oh my goodness. So when I was, back in a northern town in England where I grew up, we essentially, got the opportunity to do computer studies at O level, which was a brand new thing, right? This is in the 80s, late 70s, 80s, and I sort of took that on, did that, and kind of went from there. It just sort of kind of built. I thought there might be something in this. I learned to code as an 18-year-old, and it kind of went on from there.
So taking this course for O level really put you on that path?
Oh yeah, that was the first bit, yeah, absolutely.
And then this traineeship really sped things up and really focused you on that?
It did indeed. I was in a course, and one day, a bunch of people come in from different companies, they come and interview us, and it's kind of like, which one am I going to pick? And I just happened to get picked probably for the best role that was on offer, which was really, really fortunate. And I'll be forever in the debt of the guy that did it. He just took a chance on a 17-year-old kid and said, come and have a go at this. And I did. And they offered me a job, and on it went. Yeah.
And on it went, on and on and on. Fantastic. You said you got the opportunity to study. That was a little later on.
Yes. So obviously there was the kind of the college thing as I got out of school. But then when I was living in Ireland, in Dublin, I got the opportunity to essentially go and do a degree, an undergrad degree at Trinity College, which was, just an amazing experience. So I did that part-time, so I did that kind of outside of work. So I was supported by my employer to do it.
You've lived in some fascinating places. One which really stands out to me is being in Russia in the early 1990s. Yes. The whole world's eyes were focused on Russia at this point, and you lived there.
I did.
From a geopolitical perspective, what do you remember? What stands out?
Oh, it was a bit. The place was a bit crazy. Obviously, there was a lot going on. We were sort of living out by the airport but working in the city, and so we were bussed in and out every day. And when this kicked off in the August or September, there's tanks on the streets, there's kind of protests everywhere, they're shelling the White House. I mean, the thing was just mad, and not, just more than a little scary, I have to say.
Not only was that experience of being there in Russia incredible, as economy and society were both changing so quickly, but also the work you were doing there. This is fascinating. So you worked on one of the first Western supermarkets.
We did. So I was working for an Irish company that actually ran the duty-free shops. So they ran the duty-free shops in Russia and Finland and a few other places. And they'd formed a joint venture company, because that's generally the way that you did things in Russia. It was a bit of the Wild West.
Cutting edge.
Absolutely.
I'm going to have to go into your international experiences a little more, because they're just some fascinating places. You had some time in Jamaica, some time in the Scandinavian countries, and also some time a bit closer to home, Hong Kong and Singapore.
Yeah, I did about just under 12 months in Hong Kong. So that was working actually when I was working for PricewaterhouseCoopers, and we had the Asia Pacific retail practice. We had a lot of clients in Hong Kong and Singapore, so I ended up basically moving up there for a bunch of time and working on a few clients. Again, really interesting. Got to travel into southern China, to visit some clients there, which again was a really interesting process, you know, getting over the border and all that kind of stuff. It was a bit of fun.
Were you by yourself?
No, I was on my own in Hong Kong for most of the time. Although an interesting kind of side thing to that is it did have its benefits in that I managed to propose to my now wife on the top of Victoria Peak. So that was kind of, at least something spectacular came out of that. So
she clearly said yes.
Yeah, she did, thankfully.
Okay, yeah. Great to hear. Let's talk about how you ended up in Australia. Now, you mentioned PwC just now.
Yes. So I had been living in Ireland for about 7 years, and a colleague actually had travelled down here and had contacted me and said, "Oh, I've met this recruiter and they're looking for retail people," and I ended up securing a position with what was then Coopers & Lybrand. So I just, you know, sort of packed up and came down to Australia. I'd never been to Melbourne before. I was actually based in Melbourne to start with. I'd been to Sydney, but I'd never been to Melbourne. And got off the plane and I went to work for what became PwC not long after, actually.
So quite a random opportunity that came via a friend.
Random opportunity.
Which I believe that wasn't the only time that happened to you.
No, that happened again.
Tell us about that.
Happened again. So I, you know, most up until that sort of point, my career was tech in retail and consulting and, you know, and resale business. And then in around 2010, a friend of mine called me up one day and said, "Oh, I've got to go overseas for a bit. I've got this project. Could you run it for me?" So I was like, "Yeah, you know, it's a sort of a freelance contract." So I said, "Yeah, all right, what is it?" And he said, "Oh, it's actually in education." I said, "Oh, don't know anything about education. How's that going to work?" I said, "Well, no, it's about the technology, it'll be fine." I said, "Okay." Anyway, so I ended up taking on this piece of work with the Association of Independent Schools of New South Wales. It's the peak body for independent schools in our state, and I did this thing for a little bit, and then after a while they said, "Oh, you know, you've kind of been here for a bit. Do you want a job? Do you want to stay?" I was like, "Oh, okay, yeah, why not?" So I did. So I ended up kind of moving into education and stayed with them for about 8-9 years, which was amazing because I got to experience, you know, going into schools and of a massive variety of faiths, different cultures, different organizational setups, you know, different educational styles, a whole range of things, as well as the geography, obviously, and you know, around the state, and sizes, you know, teeny tiny 50 student schools up to 3,500 students, you know, and at some of the others. So it was an immense privilege to be able to go and actually talk to people in these businesses, in these institutions about what they were doing and how we could help them, you know, with technology.
And more recently, Paul, you've been working on some projects with Logicalis in the education space. What can you tell us about what you've achieved with Logicalis? Okay,
so we've so I'm now the head of ICT at Trinity Grammar, as you can see from the thing, and have been since 2018. And so we set off, as many schools do, around their technology, where historically, you know, the schools have invested in kind of, you know, machines and servers and things that they would have on site. So they'd have on-premise computing power, whether it's, you know, the servers, the storage, and all that sort of stuff. And these sort of, you know, these tend to get replaced on a cycle of about every 4 to 5 years. We were coming up to a point where we had to do that again. And so we needed to go through a decision-making process to work out, do we do that? Do we just go and buy some more boxes and stick them in a cupboard and just leave them and do all of that? Or do we actually do something a little bit different and take the leap and move to a cloud-based computing model so that all of our servers and all of our storage would essentially be in the cloud in Microsoft Azure? So that was a conundrum that we're faced with, right? And so I'd already done a little bit of work with Logicalis from 2021, and we got them to help us with a niche piece of work around how we built our budgeting system, which sounds a bit, you know, is a bit niche, but the thing was that, and again, this is the kind of testimony to how sometimes little projects can actually lead to other things, and you just don't realize where it's going to go. So we had a great experience with them. They put a fabulous consultant on it. The account management was great. The whole thing worked really, really well. So we then, in 2022, when we were setting off to work out what we're going to do with the cloud computing, we asked Logicalis to help us. So they said they came and worked with us on that kind of strategic piece, trying to figure out, what's the right option. Do we buy more tin? Do we go to a public cloud? Do we go to a hybrid model? Do we go to a managed service? What do we do? So they helped us kind of lay all of that out, lay all the cost implications, the risks, the benefits, the whole thing. We made the decision that we were going to do it. I took that to exec. We got that through. We said, all right, we're going to do it. We spent most of 2023 actually preparing to do it, because it's really quite hard. Like, this stuff's pretty hard. It took us a while to kind of get our heads around how to do it. And then in 2024, we essentially ran first 6 months of the year, we executed it and migrated all of our stuff out of the cupboard in the corner and put it into the cloud.
Can you give us a tangible example of how this has transformed pupils' day-to-day lives? How would they notice it in their daily education? Yeah,
it's from a student's point of view. I suppose a good example would be that during the pandemic, we had to figure out a lot of things on the fly, right? We had to invent a lot of things that we kind of did.
A hallmark of the pandemic for many people,
right? One of which was remote learning, right? So being able to, how do we even give them, that experience? What does that look like? What tools do we use? How do you know that a student's engaged? How do you know that they're actually doing the work? How do you know how do you know that they're attending school that day? I mean, there's all kinds of stuff. And so we started to dabble with the Microsoft tool set to do that. And we ended up, essentially doing remote learning using Microsoft Teams. That's how we did it. For most schools, it was either you were going to use Teams, you were going to use Google, or you're going to use Zoom. We picked Teams, and it turned out to be, for us, absolutely the right call. So off the back of that, we then started to develop for our year 9s, right? Because our year 9s take part in a thing called the Field Studies program, where they go off down to the south coast of New South Wales, and they're away for a term. Which, some parents it's hallelujah, and some it's maybe not so much. But anyway, and off the back of the pandemic stuff, we started to deploy the same kind of tools in order to kind of curate their experience down there on the devices that we gave them. They don't take their own phones, they don't take their own devices, they use our stuff. So there's a whole thing around Teams that we put into play, where they can, at the specified times, they can call their parents, they can do that stuff. So we were deploying things that we learned, and using the cloud in order to deliver a lot of this for our students off the back of that.
Incredible. So I see your journey started in Sheffield, been moving steadily south. I assume Antarctica's next.
Yeah, well, maybe. Almost. Nearly. My son was going to. I was funny because my son had just recently gone to university. He got accepted into the University of Tasmania on the Marine Science Antarctic program, and he chose Newcastle instead. So I can't get to go down there.
So full circle.
There you go. Yeah.
Paul, thank you so much for joining us on Game Changers.
It's an absolute pleasure. Thank you.